What's up guys, Sub-Zerek here, back for not a VOD review. Today we are doing a tier list video. These are the best comps of set 14 for the first patch. I did a lot of PBE games. I watched a ton of Project PBE with Kai. I talked to a lot of high elo players, and so these are my opinions informed based on that. The big weird factor is that obviously after all those PBE games were played, Riot dropped this patch. Mortdog put it out. I talked about it in the last video. I'll put it in the description if you haven't seen it. But that's the patch from PBE to live. And so all of my experience is obviously on PBE, so I'm really just trying to kind of say, well, okay, this comp got nerfed a little bit, this comp got buffed a little bit, and figure out where everything is kind of going to shake out. So these are my thoughts on where it's all going to shake out. I got 6 comps for you today. Usually I just do 5, but I wanted to do 6. As always, I am going in order from, I think, weakest to strongest, so the final comp will be, in my opinion, the strongest comp. And yeah, let's just hop into it. This is the first comp we got here. This is 8 techie, vertical techie. So the idea behind this comp is very often you can play around a really strong opener with just Veigar in the opener, honestly. And I wanted to do this full screen, but honestly, let me pop out of this and pull up another team builder so I can just kind of talk through the early game a little bit for you guys. But the early game board that you are very techie is one of these thingies, right? I believe so. No, I'm looking at Origin. I'm silly. Okay, but yeah, so let's just throw this onto the board here because this is the board that you really want to stabilize around, right? This is the early game that will be insanely strong, and obviously AP items on Veigar. You're not, in your ideal late game version of this comp building towards blue buff because you don't want to play towards Veigar forever. Veigar reroll feels like pretty awkward, so you're not looking at building anything like a blue buff very likely. If you are building blue, if you're playing into one of the other comps that I'll talk about later, but very likely you're starting the game off, you have your Veigar here, you're throwing like a Shojin onto him, you're making like a Spark or something, throwing onto Shyvana. The thing is this just 5-unit board is insanely strong. Veigar, especially if you can get to Veigar 2 Shiv 2, this is potentially like a hit level 6, if you're Veigar pair, Shiv pair, roll a little bit, and then, hit those guys and then go from there, and you can be in a really nice spot. So yeah, it's just this level 5 board is really central, and the thought is that Veigar is actually a pretty strong unit in the mid game. Vertical techie is quite strong in the mid game, so if you can get to a level 7 where you're actually playing some of these other techie units, if this can be your level 7, and very easily it can be, then you start to feel really good. This 6 techie board will honestly carry you through, obviously, like the end of stage 3, and oftentimes through stage 4 in such a way that you can usually go fast 9, because that's the other big idea about this comp, is that you want to push fast 9. If you're stuck rolling on level 8, you're not going to be very happy. Theoretically, I mean, you can fit a techie in on 8 if you hit a Viego, but it's not guaranteed. I hate the idea of like playing for a specific 5 cost when rolling on 8, so you really don't want to be doing that. What you want to be doing is going fast 9, being able to play for stuff like Viego. Obviously, the Koboko fits beautifully onto this board. He's Bruiser, and then he gets Cyber Boss from the Veigar. You're always going to want to put the Cyber Boss on Koboko, obviously, because Veigar, the items are going to move over later. Brand can be kind of like your bridge, so, imagine that you're doing this kind of setup here, and then, you end up picking up a Brand. Well, then, okay, then we just move our Veigar items over to Brand. I just turned Veigar into I just swapped him, but you get the idea. You move your Shojin over to Brand, and put yourself into a really nice spot. So yeah, put this here, and then you make a JG or something. You're chilling on similar boards like this. There are ways of, obviously, like once you're at like this version of the board, of just getting like Street Demon in. So if you end up picking up a Nico, she's obviously a very easy addition, and then you can get Street Demon in on a board like this and play around something like this on level 8 and feel really good about it, and then eventually cap out playing around this kind of stuff. I think this is the best board. If you end up hitting a ton of 5 costs, you can start teching out of these techies, dropping out of 8 techie, dropping out of the Seraphine, and it's really not Veigar, it's usually like Fiddlesticks you're dropping, because you actually can like fit Street Demon here. So that's something that you can do, but this is actually just a pretty cheap fast 9 board where if you get to 8 techie, this Viego unit, he got nerfed a little bit, but he's still going to be a monster. Brand got a pretty decent buff, so he's going to be a lot better to kind of stabilize you in the mid game. Still though, you're really excited about going fast 9 with this comp. So this is the first comp. This is the first comp because I think it's a very solid AP option. It's contingent on the fact that you can make it to 9 and that you get to play around Viego, because if you're stuck on 8 with no Viego, you're going to feel really bad. You're not going to have access. Like if this is your cap, you're just not going to feel that good. You're going to be, playing for like a 5th or a 6th or something. So you really want to be able to make it to the Viego and the Koboko type stuff. But yeah, that is vertical techie. All right, next comp we got here. This is a really nice straightforward one. This is one that you could we were doing the patch kind of like, well, not patch review, but kind of like set review with Demacian Raptor, Disco, and Kai was there. And Disco said something about this comp that is very true. It's like, this comp requires no conditions. This is a comp where you could play it every single game and you would feel fine. If there's a comp where you want to start the set off and you're just going to hard force a comp, this is the #1 comp to do it. It's insanely straightforward to play. You just play 4 Marksman, 4 Vanguard on level 8. The synergies are beautiful because you get to fit Silas in here to get Anima Squad in. You get to fit Jarvan in here to fit Golden Ox. And then Ross is, just Divinicore, not bad. And then you can just fit in the 4 Marksman and feel really, really good about it. But yeah, you just get to play this board and you feel fantastic about it. It's really, really stable on 8. You can roll down, hit boom, boom, boom. It's very inflexible. I'll talk about the other version of it, but it's basically just this version or another version. If you find 5 cost, it's a little awkward because like if you start dropping out of Jinx and Jhin and stuff like that just for like a random Garen, you're actually going to be kind of low damage. So it's a little scary actually in that regard, but it's good for people who just want something really, really straightforward. I'm going to roll down and play this comp, and that's what this is. Itemization wise, Xayah is kind of like an AD caster type unit. She's, yeah, the way you itemize Xayah is just stuff like this. You want her to get a big spell off, so the IE is quite valuable. The Shojin is obviously not bad on her just to get her like actually casting. But yeah, like this is the setup that you are very likely playing for on Xayah, and then she spreads Last Whisper actually really nicely. So good holder of that. So yeah, I mean, you just want her to be able to get those casts off. Ideally, when the target dies, bounce to other targets, apply LW, and then Aphelios is a dude who the big thing is when he equips the chakrams, you just want to have a ton of attack speed there. So you don't really care that much about the Moonblast. You can go stuff like Infinity Edge onto him. That's perfectly fine. The Gwinsu is quite core on him. Like honestly, you should probably go Gwinsu something. Gwinsu Gunblade, not bad to just kind of like amp up your front line. But Gwinsu IE, totally fine. If you have a GS, that can obviously go on Xayah or Aphelios. You can be pretty happy with a lot of stuff on Aphelios. And that's the other nice thing about this comp is really flexible itemization wise, right? Start off the game with a Gwinsu, you can put it on Aphelios. Start off the game with an IE, a Shojin, you can put it on Xayah, LW, it can go on Xayah, it could go on, Aphelios if it has to, Gunblade. You can hold kind of whatever, like on these guys. Xayah holds your AD caster items, Aphelios holds your AD attack speed items. So really, really solid, just kind of item flexibility there. And then you're main tanking Leona, ideally. Leona does get this big amount of durability when she casts. She does actually stun the unit, like her target, which is kind of interesting. You can use that to stun like melee carries is the thing that's quite cool about that. But the big thing is you just itemize her as a tank because she gets this big amount of durability. You want a lot of HP, a lot of armor, and MR to scale that up. She's actually like, you shouldn't think of her as this kind of like Protector's Vow type tank where like, you want to build this and get her casting. Getting her casting is not bad and Vow is not bad, but she is kind of like just a big tank. Oh yes, and then the only other thing to kind of talk about is the other version of this comp, because if you have reason for it, you can cut these guys. You can play just a 6 Vanguard board as well. This is a totally reasonable version of this as well. If you have any of if you have the Vanguard augment, then you can certainly just build this version. Or if you just, aren't hitting the Marksman, or, if you feel like you need extra frontline and you're good on the damage route, then you can go this. I've seen people play both of these versions. They've both done well. So just really kind of a play what you hit situation, or, if you're in a situation where you're like, you know what, all my augments were damage augments. I feel like I have enough damage. I'm just going to take this tanky setup so I can be tanky. Then, do something like that. But yeah, it's a really consistent AD comp that you can play. Just very, very easy to roll down for on level 8. You can team planner this. Like I said, there's not much that you can really fit extra on this board. You can play the standard, 5 cost like God of the Net type stuff or Zac type stuff, but that's really, you're looking at that on level 9, right? It's really, really hard to play that on level 8. All right, going into the next comp, we have Twisted Fate Reroll. So interestingly, PBE was kind of dominated by reroll, right? You had the Nitro reroll comp that was really strong. You had Vayne reroll that was really strong. You had Executioners that were really strong. You had, Kog'Maw reroll that was really strong. And you had Twisted Fate reroll that was really strong. And a lot of these other, Shaco reroll that was really strong. A lot of those other lines got hit pretty significantly. One of the ones that was barely touched at all was Twisted Fate reroll. They just nerfed 5 Syndicate, which is a nerf to this comp because very often you are playing the 5 Syndicate version. But still, Twisted Fate didn't receive any kind of a nerf. Yeah, the comp itself was just really barely touched, which surprised me because I do think it was about at the level of some of the other reroll comps, maybe a little bit weaker. But once you nerf everything else, that brings this to the forefront. So this, I will say, is a premier reroll comp to be playing on the set. The key is Gwinsu Gunblade TF. Don't listen to this Kai guy who tries to tell you that you should go some kind of caster TF. The Twisted Fate unit, if you read his ability, passive, gain 2 ability power each attack. That means if you can go Gwinsu, get him up to 30 auto attacks, he's got an extra 60 AP, and the Gunblade, the great thing about that is it plays for longer fights. It allows you to draw out fights and yeah, just play for those long fights. So really, really easy to play for. You can also, I mean, as far as units that you can 3-star, these are like the big ones that you can look for. You know, you can go for the Skarner 3, he fits really nicely with Kog'Maw to get Boombot in, and then Darius and Braum, and obviously Gragas fits in as just a bruiser, a good bruiser to Divinicore. But yeah, itemization wise, you know, you can just throw your tank items onto Darius or onto Braum. They're both pretty kind of like, well, I mean, Darius is like kind of a weird like damage tank dude, but I feel Braum is definitely like the, if you're in an ideal world, you know, you're getting to all your huge tank items onto Braum. He gets this shield, so Armor Noir is quite nice on him as well, and he's Vanguard, but HP, you know, scales with Vanguard as well. So, you know, something, I mean, you can do the really standard setup of something like this is totally fine. You can also, you know, I wouldn't mind something like this as well if I can find Gargoyle Stoneplate. I can't find it. There it is. Something like this, Gargoyles plus like a Vow. Just get him casting, and you know, you can even start to like solo frontline him at that point if you hit him 3-star early enough. On the 5 Syndicate, you're obviously always putting the hat onto Twisted Fate from Syndicate, but you do get a second Kingpin. I think it's quite solid on Braum if you hit Braum 3. You can also put it on MF and duo carry her. It's really, once again, depending on what you need. I would default to Twisted Fate Braum, especially if you have Braum 3, but you know, maybe if you're stuck on Braum 2 and you have a Misfortune 2, then you can put the second hat onto her and duo carry her. Seems, it's perfectly solid. And you know, obviously if you hit something like a Skarner 3 and you're stuck on not Braum, then okay, then just, you know, put all the items onto the Skarner. So yeah, this is actually the only reroll comp I have on the suggested comps list. I think Executioners is also pretty decent, but yeah, I mean, they hit a lot of them. So yeah, and this one, I feel like it was barely touched at all. So I think this will be one of the premier or reroll comps going into the set. All right, next comp we got here is, I guess we have some more kind of like light reroll comps, some comps that can be reroll or they can be 4-cross centric. So maybe that's not the only reroll comp technically. We have Divinicore Slayer Zed here. This comp, I mean, it received a decent nerf in Zed's AD, went from 55 down to 50, so it received a decently big nerf to his AD, but Zed is just such a monstrous unit after they buffed him on PBE. Early PBE, he was pretty wimpy, but now he's strong. Stand tall, Zed. You can pop off. Like he's actually quite good. So this is a pretty standard version of the board. The nice thing is that you can fit for Slayer super easily, just because you have a Divinicore Slayer, you have Zed, who's your main carry, you have Jarvan, who fits with Vanguard and with Rost, and then you have Mundo, who fits with Bruiser and for Gragas. So one of those boards that just fits together really, really, really nicely. You can get Renekton in later, obviously, and get Divinicore. You can take a bite out of Zed, or you can take a bite out of Senna. Either one is fine. You know, really just depends on like if you're hitting stuff like Senna 3, if you have Senna itemized. You really want to be biting a Slayer just because they get all of that extra AD, and they also get healing. So you don't even feel that bad about, you know, Renekton biting someone like Senna, because she's just going to heal up with Slayer. The other thing to say about Senna is that you can play this as a Senna reroll comp. Just play for Senna 3 on something like a level 7, and then, you know, just play this comp in the exact same way, but with Senna 3 as a carry. And then you really want to bite Senna in that situation because she's gonna have so much AD. The Senna unit just has a ton of base AD, basically because they gave her really low base attack speed. But yeah, itemization wise, Senna, she has the thing you have to know about Senna is she's very low attack speed, and she's also pretty big mana. So you can think of Senna a lot like Caitlyn from last set, who was really low attack speed. But the thing about Caitlyn is you can build blue buff on her and get her kind of instant cast. And you can't do that on Senna. So you really just want to play for one big cast and just strong auto attacks. So something like an IE Last Whisper Renan's is quite solid onto her. Renan's does quite well onto her just because she has a lot of AD. You can also go stuff like Deathblade onto her. Yeah, if you could find it, but it's alphabetical, I realize. But yeah, you can go something like Deathblade on her and feel really, really nice about that. So yeah, I mean, You don't want to build Guinsoo on her. The only time you ever want to build Guinsoo on her is if you're playing for like a 6 Vanguard Senna setup or 6 Bruiser Senna setup. Then you can maybe think about it. But outside of those setups, I'd really stay away from Guinsoos on this unit. And then Shojin as well is just not that great. Just go for damage Senna. And then Zedimization, he plays a decent bit for his cast, so IE is quite nice. And then Hodge obviously has really nice synergy with IE. The crit chance gets made effective when you have an IE. Edge of Night, I like a decent bit on Zed. There are some blue buff Zed enjoyers out there. The stats don't really back up that blue buff Zed is that good. The idea is that you just kind of get him spam casting, and his blue buff is almost like an Edge of Night in that it, helps him just teleport to the other side of the board and drop aggro. But the stats don't really bear it out. If you are building blue buff, you want to you'd be cutting the Edge of Night and putting blue buff onto him. So, maybe you end up in a world where you have 2 tiers and you're thinking of playing this comp. Absolutely just slam blue buff onto Zed and play it. I just wouldn't go out with the goal of playing blue buff. I don't think that's what you should go for. But yeah, he's always teleporting to backline. So I like Edge of Night just so that he doesn't get, one tapped by anything. But yeah, the blue buff, maybe with more time, blue buff will turn out to be amazing or something, but yeah, I don't know about no blue buff Zed. But all right, on to the next comp. This is a fun one, and I think one that's pretty underexplored. So Misfortune is one of the carries that was really just, I think she was fine. I think quite underrated going into the end of PBE. And with everything else being nerfed, she actually gets some time in the sun to shine. And so there's basically 2 versions of this comp that you can play. You can play just the standard Misfortune carry and then kind of duo carry Elise. And then obviously once you find Aurora, move items over to Aurora and be quite happy with that. Or you can play basically this exact same board as an Elise reroll comp, which is really cool. You obviously can reroll for the other 3 costs, the Braum and the Gragas. So you can go for Braum 3, Gragas 3, Elise 3 and feel really good about it. Or like I said, yeah, you can just play this as a fast 8. The board just once again fits nicely. It's playing around. We've had this in a few kind of comps, but Braum and Darius, the Bruiser and Vanguard. There's also a Bruiser and Vanguard on Divinicore, so it fits really nicely. And there's a Dynamo Divinicore, so boom. It fits together beautifully. And then this board, we're just fitting in 2 more Dynamo to get some extra mana gen onto our board. Aurora is also a great unit to fit in. But yeah, Elise reroll, honestly, probably the most underrated reroll comp of PBE. People barely play this, but I think it performed really well when you got to play it. She is a very solid carry in her own right. So be excited if you get an Elise orb from drop. I would be really interested in playing the Elise reroll version of this comp. And if not, you can just play towards Misfortune. I have found that even with 4 Dynamo, she still struggles to get a cast because she's 150 mana. So even with 4 Dynamo, I still would build a Shojin on her. If you don't get it, you'll live probably because you do get a lot of mana gen from Dynamo, but I think you do really want the Shojin onto Misfortune, even with 4 Dynamo, and then IE just to make her spell crit. Last Whisper is a nice way to spread Sunder onto, basically the entire board, and, make sure her first wave of bullets is sundering, and then the next ones are benefiting from that Sunder, but, you can obviously go stuff like Deathblade onto her, Giant Slayer, okay. The nice thing about MF is that oftentimes she can snipe backline. You can even, move her into positions like here or here to, potentially get a big V in and snipe backline, because it goes to the largest clump of enemies. You really want the edge of the bullets to be hitting enemy backline, which you can often do with positioning like this or this, but it really just depends on where their front lines position. If they have a front line that's a little bit more off center to the right, then you can do something like this and get a nice wave off and hit that and potentially snipe out backline. So yeah, just honestly, probably a really underrated 4-cost unit. There's a reason why this is the second comp, the comp before the first comp, because I do think this is the comp that was barely touched by nerfs, and I expect this comp to be the dominant level 8 comp and potentially reroll comp as well as we go into the set tomorrow. So we'll see though. All right, and all of that into our final comp. This, in my opinion, is the strongest comp of set 14. It won't be a surprise to anyone who watched a lot of PBE. This is Fast 9 AMP Strategist. This comp did receive some nerfs. Viego got hit, Samira got hit, Ziggs actually received a buff, but I don't think the nerfs are enough to take this comp out of the meta. This, if you were at all in a win streak position and you think I can make it to level 9, and that's going to happen a lot when you are playing live, just because a lot of people are going to be getting used to the units, they're going to be getting used to, traits, augments, all that kind of stuff. They're going to be making poor slams and things like that. So if you're in a win streak position and you think you can make it to 9, play this board and you will just destroy lobbies. There's just so many nice synergies you can fit in onto this board. As you can see, it just fits in beautifully. You get the 4 strat in, but then you get Street Demon in, you get AMP with some really easy AMP units to fit in. This fits in Golden Ox as well for the Viego. It's so easy. And then you get Techie in. I like Mordekaiser as like a way to fit in Bruiser actually for Koboko and get Techie in. I think this is kind of like the beautiful board. But there are also obviously like you can cut units. It often becomes kind of awkward to figure out what you want to cut because like you're usually not cutting stuff like the strategist, the Yumian things, but this Mordekaiser can be a flex slot if you have this Mordekaiser, but you end up hitting something like a Garen or a Garen 2, you can end up playing for that. You're gonna often want to get Techie in, so there's ways, if you don't have Koboko, like if you haven't hit Koboko yet and this is your setup and you're itemizing Nico as your main tank, then you can do something like this and fit Techie in like this, and a little sketchy, but Annie also provides some extra frontline. That's the other thing, is this Annie itemization. Annie is really, really relevant on getting to that forecast Tibber. If you don't get to forecast Tibber, she's pretty worthless. If you get to forecast Tibber, she summons a big front line that does damage. It's so good. So you are going max mana gen on her. Blue buff Shojin Nasher's Tooth. This is BIS Annie, and you just build this any chance you can get. If you start the game off with a blue buff, you're looking at potentially playing towards Annie, very likely. Not potentially, you are very likely playing Annie. So something that you can play around. Samira is a fantastic AD carry. The nice thing about this board, right, is that AP items, AD items, it can take them all. You can, if you just slam good items and push fast 9, you can play this comp very easily under most circumstances and, win games of TFT, which is usually good early on into the set. But yeah, Samira takes your AD items. She does, love and IE so that she can crit on this cast. And then Last Whisper is nice as well, just, to be, shredding the entire board. And then Hodge is a nice way to make sure that she kind of like lives when she is potentially dashing into the entire board. But whatever AD items can go on her, you can do stuff as all the stuff that we've been talking about. You can throw a Giant Slayer onto her, you can throw a Guard Breaker onto her, you don't really want Gwinsus onto her, it's pretty stinky on her, so probably don't go Gwinsus or stuff like Renan's on her. But Deathblade, she's like a caster, right? You want to play for that big cast. And then Viego, I don't think we talked about Viego items when I was talking about Techie, but he gets a bunch of AP. I mean, especially in the vertical techie comp, he gets a bunch of AP, but he gets a little bit of AP from just being a techie. So JG's pretty good on him. Healing's good on him. Stuff like Hodge, stuff like BT. You can go stuff like Edge of Night as well if you want it. He does have Shred built in, so that's pretty cool. So you don't really need to put something like a Spark onto him. You can, just so that he's shredding before he hits everybody, but I don't think it's really that valuable. I really think you can just do stuff like this and feel good about it. But yeah, that is the comps list. Obviously, new stuff will emerge as the set goes live. We're gonna have a ton of data over the next few days. So what I'm probably gonna do is I'm gonna have this video, and then in a few days I'm gonna do an updated video of just once we have all the data. But these are my predictions for what's gonna be strong. I think these are, just using these comps is going to give you guys a big leg up on the competition. If you just, play some of these lines, your games will be very, very easy. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. Check out my Twitch, my Metafy, all my other links down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching as always. Bye.